let's look back and understand the esports a bit more in detail. The Esports Olympic Medal Quest, our next session, a path for India to win an esports Olympic medal. We have Mr. Nimish Raut from Nodwin, and he is a global esports head. I would like to introduce him and request him to please be on the stage. New age sports marketing person who switches to esports around 2023 to 2024, and he makes a mark across. May have Nimish Raut from Nodwin to be on the panel, please. He is moderating our session, and I would like to request him to introduce his speakers.
Check, check. We're going to get a full hours now, eh? Okay, so before I start with the panel discussion, I would like to introduce the speakers. First, we have Mr. Sohn, Hyunil, the CEO of RAFTON India. We have Mr. Anurag Khurana from NewGen Gaming. We got Santosh from 7 Seas Esports again. And then we have Mr. Abhishek Issar from FEAI. And the topic for today is going to be esports and Olympic medal quest. What can India do and what should we do to make sure that India wins a medal? So good evening, everyone. I think I've had a pleasure to actually meet everyone in a personal capacity and work with every one of you all. So this should be a good one. So why don't we start with something that's on everyone's mind, right? Since it's a very interesting topic. Esports is a very complicated subject. I think not everyone really understands it. So why don't we kind of figure out, one, what is esports according to you guys? And does it really need regulation? It's a very open-ended question, but we can start with whoever wants to go first and get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I can go first. I think this kind of question, I think someone who answered first would get some benefits. I think the latter that it will be more difficult.
All right.
Okay.
Then I'll go then.
So yeah, please. Yeah.
Nimish, thank you for the question. Again, thank you CII for having all of us here. Just to talk about esports, right? Whether it is regulated or not, the answer is I don't know. The reason being that I started my journey not in India, started in Thailand. So it is a regulated market over there. But when I came back to India, when I started 7C here, it is not regulated. But at the same time, because it is not regulated, I have seen a lot of things that are not potentially not possible outside are possible here. So again, as I said, right, it is still, since India is still in a very niche market at the moment, I think it is good that even if you're putting regulations in the very beginning, it would help grow in a certain way so that all the stakeholders would be understanding what are the possible things that we can do in this line of business, right? But the same way, if at all we are pursuing in this direction that there is no regulation for the next 5 years, I think there will be too many big companies and there will be companies that are way too small, right? Maybe that would be that is not good for a healthy competition. That's my take.
Well, I guess Anurag, who's pretty much a veteran in this industry, would definitely have his point of view on this.
So, Nimish, we have discussed this a lot of time. I am against government regulation, but I'm for regulation. Because according to me, it's very difficult for government to understand new age tech. Look at software industry. The growth of software industry is because there was no government there, but there was NASCOM who was bringing up that industry. So I'm from that opinion. Government regulation, no regulation, of course.
Okay. Let's get the most interesting person on the panel. He obviously runs the federation. Sorry, 1 minute. He's currently obviously a part of the FEAI, and I'm sure that his point of view would really help us to understand why we need regulation in esports.
Thanks, Nimish. I don't know whether I'm audible or not, but if you guys can't hear me, let me know. I can go louder. So first of all, commendations to CII and, of course, all the core stakeholders, partners, Jet Synthesis included, for having to set up this convening and convention. Also having us all here. I've had the good pleasure, just like you, Nimish, to have known most of the panelists. Of course, I'm meeting Sohn today, so good to see you. It's only appropriate that we have the Federation of Electronic Sport Association here on the regulatory conversation. I thought I'll wait it out and listen to everybody else and then maybe sort of get into this deliberation of whether it's important or not. I feel, leave alone everything else. I think the Indian government, and I'm with you, Anurag, when you're suggesting that, regulations have multiple implications by way of having to play an enabling role for the industry. And I think the government of the day today is very conscious of that element, that they're not here to kind of play roadblock in the ecosystem. But as far as esports is concerned, I often feel, and correct me, gentlemen, subsequently, that the reason why the industry has only moved at a certain pace so far has been also partially because of the absence of absolute regulation. And therefore, I feel that, as you were rightly pointing out, that if we continue on that track, there will be a very clear class divide, if I were to put it simply, between the behemoths and then the minors, if I were to put it simply, right? And therefore, to make a level playing field for the industry to sort of participate and collaborate, and then therefore be able to also engage eventually with the last mile. Because when we look at an industry, and we are talking about regulating this industry size always matters, right? Here, both by way of business, by way of the commercial values around it, we are definitely a very, very small stakeholder in the larger scheme of affairs when it comes to organized and recognized industries. But that's where we are by way of the journey so far. The most important part, and I'd stop at that, at least for this particular question, is back in December, we've had the government take an official stand now, which is to be able to recognize and formally acknowledge that there is a clear demarcation between electronic sports and online gaming per se. I feel that is one very important step and decision that's taken in the right direction. Why? Because esports in India, and I'm limiting myself to esports because regulation and most of the stakeholders here are representing that space. For us to be able to represent the country, because that's the eventual goal of this panel discussion, we need to be first identified as an independent incubated space where all the stakeholders, whether it's the industry, whether it's the policy makers, or eventually the end beneficiary, which are the athletes, the policy impact, the commercial valuations must percolate down all the way down to the last athlete. And today, we're looking at a very minuscule number. So I feel when online gaming is being considered to be parked under Ministry of Electronics, and the government has been very aggressive in that approach, Ministry of Youth Affairs and Sports has been open to accept esports now. I feel we are on a fantastic roadmap to kind of resuscitate and really shape out.
That's quite an interesting direction that you've taken. I like Sohn to give his views, and then I have a leading up question to that. But I'll come back to that. Let Sohn kind of put his point of view across to us as well.
Yeah, maybe I don't understand all the history or complications in India's esports industry, although I've been here like 1.5 years. But my view as a person who are working for a game publisher, I feel esports, probably it's better not to have full regulation from government side. There should be more like governance, a governing body, so that the companies or businesses in that industry can self-regulate. And then maybe government need to intervene on that process, which make more alignment with the government direction in the long term. That's my view.
I think that's an interesting thought as well. And coming back to Abhishek, just the follow-up question was, I think we all agree to the fact that regulation is great. The question is going to be who actually then calls the shots, right? I would say there are publishers involved, there are players involved, there's the federation, there's the tournament organizer, and then there is a whole industry which sits outside of this, right? So how are we going to solve this question? Because every stakeholder is extremely important. Do you have any kind of model or any kind of light that you can put on that? and then we can take the conversation forward?
100%, and I'll try and be condensed this time. Uh, there are two aspects to this. I think you've mentioned that what should be the construct of this regulation. The government of the day has taken a very clear stand for the online gaming space, which is substantially larger compared to esports. They have defined what we call the intermediary guidelines, whereby there is a conversation that a prospective self-regulatory organization, which will be presided over not directly by the industry, but in representation of the industry, but of course in participation of either former bureaucrats and so on and so forth. But to curate a body like that, which plays an intermediary role between the industry and the government, and then therefore standardize an outlook which reflects the best governance practices for the industry to follow. So I feel that's one ideal outlook to look at, right? As a federation ourselves, and let's call a spade, we are not the only one in the market, but fact of the matter is we know that the intent that we are here with, our intention is very clear, is to be able to build an ecosystem which is befitting and benefiting the entire country. We are a body of 26 state chapters. It's not easy to sort of have a representation across the country. And therefore we realized, and to good credits to various stakeholders like, Penta here, Anurag, Kevin Esports, and so many others, Jet Synthesis of course involved, we've understood the real penetration is at the grassroots. And that's the part we feel has been missing in a large sense. A fantastic organization like, RAFTON, how they've sort of operated in the last year or so, has seen the larger tournaments come out over the, if I were to put it, the cream of the player ecosystem. But by having such intermediary guidelines and an organization that can standardize practices, help empower eventually, not just the top industrialists, the mid-core, but eventually have the benefits trickle down to the players and athletes. I feel that is the sense of confidence that will give not just to the Indian ecosystem, but also to the investor community to sort of come into India and then, and to put it simply, compare it with India's best sporting example, which is BCCI. If BCCI is signing up with Saudi government today, and it's an announcement from yesterday, and it's a high number, high commercial value engagement, it's only because there's a very strong anchor in BCCI and how it operates, and it's directly and very closely aligned without getting into details with the policy makers.
Just hold on to that thought. I'll come back with a question on that. But since we have other stakeholders involved as well, I'd like to talk to Santosh as a team owner. We'll come back to the question of how India can gear up for the Olympics. But that also has a huge question mark. As a team owner, do you feel that representation of the country dilutes representation of a team or the brand value that you build as a team yourself, and then eventually your player goes and represents the flag, but then what happens to your team? Like, how do you build a business around that?
Well, I think last year we went to Saudi, my team went to Saudi, and we represented as an Indian representative to play as a BGMI champions. So at that time, when I was talking to the team, the first thing is that I'm playing for my country. I think for them that is more important, right? Whether I build a team or not, it's okay, right? At the end of the day, we are an Indian company, right? I think the pride is always there for us. And whatever we build, I think it only boosts us further and gives us the opportunity to represent the country, right? Even though we are called an Indian team, we are so happy rather than just calling our name. But at the end of the day, their branding is more important. Yes, so we trickle down what is necessary for us, and we make sure that it's nationalism, it's a national pride. At the same time, of course, we keep the company branding together, right? We have to balance it out.
But then, do you feel that representation at the Olympic level or the Asian Games level should be done by teams specifically, or a bunch of good players coming together and forming an India team?
If you honestly ask me, I don't think it's just a team. I would rather say it has to be the India's best players to be competing there.
Cool. I think that pretty much answers my doubts as a team owner. But I'd like to ask Anurag, as a tournament organizer, where does a tournament organizer go in this ecosystem? I'm going to say we already have a working relationship with publishers. I think we all know the current situation with tournament organizers. Now, when the federation comes in and there's a representation for the country, what role do you think a tournament organizer will play in all of this?
So, if you look at what we do, I can't speak for all the TOs. I can talk more about me or Nodwin. Either way works for me because I know both the companies very well. So if you look at us, we are focused on the grassroots level. So we are the Ranji Cup for the ICC team. That's how we are positioned. Yes, we are like we're running two leagues, amateur league, where none of the professional players can participate. That is to bring the limelight, camera on this budding talent. And second is the collegiate league because that's where the new talent is being done. Going to level of people like Nodwin, where they are actually honing out best of the best and telling this is the winner from our league, not India representative. What I want you to tell, add to your previous question, Nimish, is that if it's a team representing India, it can't be Mohun Bagan or Mumbai Indians. It has to be a combination of teams. Like, you can't say Mumbai team is Team India. It's never. Whether they are participating in that region or not. I think it's the regional teams which are the clubs. But the national team has to come out from the best of the country because I know in Korea, that's how they make the team. It's not SK or that. The team Korea is actually combination of all the teams of League of Legends. That's how the team comes out. So I think that's what is important. And
I think
we are playing a role of identification of the new talent.
I think that's a very interesting point, and I think that brings Sohn into the picture for sure. I think the role of the publisher with the federation is going to be extremely crucial. Can you throw some light in terms of what you think is the best way for the publisher to actually take charge and work with the federation? Because I think the best representation of the country, the best person to decide that is the person who made the game. So would you like to share your thoughts on how that model could shape up?
Yeah, I think I can share a little bit of things happening in Korea for Asia Games happening in September. So I think that it's as you said, it's very crucial to have multiple parties in like selecting the best player on what grounds, on what kind of events, and training them, coaching them, and to become the best team that you can actually produce from your own country. So there should be a role from the federation. There should be a role from, let's say, esports community. Can be represented by commentators and veteran esports players, and also publishers. Publishers know and can support the older training, the know-hows and facilities, and to be honest, publisher has a deeper pocket than others. So all this combined, and then the benefits out of this Olympic or Asian Game events actually lead to more spotlight on games for the long term. So I think it all combines the efforts from different players, and then actually it is happening in Korea, but not in Korea, not just in Korea, in other countries too. I think there will be more thing to learn from those experiences for us, I guess.
I think that brings me back to Abhishek. I think now that we've heard the tournament organizer, we've heard the team owner, we've heard the publisher, I guess the traditional model of how a federation works with state federations and then eventually representation from India might not be the right approach. Do you have a model that you would like to throw some light on? Something that the FEAI stands for and something that we can be introduced, because the Asian Games is what, in September now? And I think we're all kind of waiting to figure out how the representation of India is going to happen. And then we'll come to the last question, which is more generic in nature, but if you can just throw light on this.
For sure. Unfortunately, because of this noise, I couldn't hear much of what Sohn was saying, but net, I would assume that, as a publisher, they would want to work closely with the ecosystem, right? Including the federation. So it's very simple. How I look at it, we call it a pyramid, right? But what we are intending to do, and I've had this conversation with Anurag at one point in time, I remember, which is to reverse the pyramid, which is to, of course, put the volume and the scale into this ecosystem. And we are more than happy, as we have been previously, to be able to speak with the publishers. I think to basically, in extension of what everybody was saying over here, can there be one team that can represent the country or a bunch of teams that come together to represent the country? I don't think it'll be fair. Why? Because unlike a cricket or a football, where a gestation period to identify talent and then eventually get him to that rung where he can sort of compete is much longer compared to esports, right? I can actually get a world-class player in a span of months and not years, unlike any other sport. So the propensity of the ecosystem thriving within a circular sort of
That also depends on the game, though.
Sorry?
It also depends on the game.
100%. The fortunate part here is if you're referring to the Asian Games, Commonwealth Games, Olympics, we're not referring to one title. We're referring to a mix of them, right? And therefore, we need to create an ecosystem where the federation at one end is working very closely in tandem with the organizers, Pentas, Nodwins, Jets of the world, etc. And along with that, we are also able to incubate a bottom tier grassroots sort of an engagement. You know, we've done this very well with Kemin Esports. We're building a university program. They've done this very well. We've had detailed conversations with Penta as well. And we are here to essentially open the doors of engagement and coming back then to engaging with the publisher. So what I feel is that there is always a propensity to regulation doesn't mean that you got to control things. Regulation means that you got to enable things. That's how we look at it. So when you refer to states, traditionally each state, and by the way, this is as per law of the land, and we have to, of course, abide by that. As per the law of the land, and because esports will fall under sports, it is already considered under sports. Every national organization like ours must have a state body. That state body must be conducting its own independent talent identification and management program. As you rightly put it, the Ranji of cricket. The idea is then to essentially put that entire talent on multiple rungs of competition, right? Whether it's a Ranji, whether it's an IPL, which is a league format, which Nodwin has, for instance, done, or whether it's the university program. All of that must be paired against one standard backbone, which I call the ranking system, which unfortunately in this country has never existed. And that's an effort that, we are trying to sort of mobilize with multiple stakeholders. And here, whether it's, for instance, a Penta or a Sky or a Nodwin holding 3 different tournaments, so long as that's in alignment with the federation, we are happy to essentially rank the players based on the outcomes you have conducted as a tournament operator. Likewise, when you're going to the grassroots, we are more than welcome to introduce or induct the amateurs and then put them through a training program. If I were to ask, who's coaching these teams, tier 1 teams, right? And there are a handful few, less than 40, correct me if I'm wrong. Now, if the largest and the biggest tournaments in this country are being hosted by tier 1 athletes, which are housed under less than 40 team owners, I'm looking at less than 1,000 players representing India in the largest tournaments currently. That's definitely not the ecosystem we want to build. We want kids from different parts of this country, from Leh Ladakh, Northeast, etc., coming together, competing and finding a common ground of engagement, because that is what esports, that's where esports wins over the others. It's not an infrastructure dependent ecosystem. The infrastructure is the easy part over here. Last but not the least is when it comes to your question on the Asian Games. One important milestone moment that has sort of happened very recently is the election and the induction of the Olympic Association of India. It's a very important organization and body as far as the regulatory lineup is concerned for any body like ours. We've already been advising Ministry of Youth Affairs and Sports and Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology and Electronics. We've submitted our papers and we are fortunate they've been well received. They've been sort of immersed by way of the feedback that they've eventually come out in public with. Now, I think the important element is with the induction of the Olympic Association to be able to submit to them some of the best practices. Because as I said, you cannot have a fair representation, whether it means that we have to wait it out for a holistic participation for these Asian Games, or we conduct a smaller sort of an engagement by way of a representation. The idea is a fair representation is more important than a haphazard one. And we've had instances, unfortunately, where some of the previous players have come back and complained. It wasn't under our aegis for sure.
No, absolutely. I think it's always a pleasure to talk to Abhishek. And just to let you know, the tournament organizers, the players and the teams, we are waiting. We just want to know who's the official federation, right? I would say, we are happy to work with anyone, but let's just do that.
Maybe the idea should be to engage in conversation and start building properties and working together more than waiting for an outcome to happen, because as we've seen, things take time. Yep. We need to empower the government showing, listen, this is why we are doing the right things based on some of the best practices in the country. Cool. And that's where we are.
And that brings us to the last question. I think the most interesting one is obviously going to be to figuring out how is India going to gear up for this year's Asian Games? Are we a contender for a medal? And what role does everyone play in this? Do we look at younger audiences? Do we look at colleges? Do we look at schools as a program? How are we going to get ready for esports to be a part of the Olympic or the Asian Games? Let's go one by one. Let's start with Sohn. What role can publisher play to make sure that India is a powerhouse in the next 5 years at any of these global competitions?
I think publisher is in a good position to know how other countries are actually preparing for such events, and then actually can share all those findings or learnings across countries. I think that's the role which publisher can play.
Okay, Anurag.
Can you repeat the question, please?
So the question is, now that India is gearing up for the Asian Games and the global competitions, what roles individual stakeholders can play? So publisher, Sean's kind of spoken about it. What do you think a tournament organizer has to do?
So I think, as I said, we are identifying the new talent. Of course, then TOs like you need to actually do tournaments from the existing talent and the new talent and find the best in the country. Then, according to me, association need to come in that, okay, this is the talent pool, this is my team representing India. That is very critical, man. Of course, then the issue which we discussed, Abhishek brought out, there's no, I know a couple of teams have staff, sports staff, but 90% of the today esports TO organizations don't have a sports staff, man. We need that infrastructure in place.
Santosh?
Well, if at all we are competing in Asian Games or any other games representing Team India, as a team owner, I see myself as I'm training some of the best players, right? So at the same time, it's not just me. There are about 40, 50 organizations that are there. They're also training the best players in the country. I think what the federation or the government can recognize is that these could be the first set of players that they can look at. If at all there is a competition that is coming in where people can represent the country, these are the companies that are investing on players and developing their skill set, developing their gameplay and the game mentality, right? So, when you are, let's take cricket as an example, right? So, from an early stage to a state player to a Griggs player and to a Ranji and then to an national player, there are stages. I think these tier 1 sector would probably come at that Ranji level, right? Where we can see that these are some of the best talent already available in the market, right? So that's what we as an esports owner would be scouting for, right? We want the best team. So maybe federation can recognize that and give them an opportunity, right? At the same time, we are not opposed to the thing that if it is coming to an open tournament, right? The ranking system, what FEAI or ESFI, right? There are so many federations at the moment, right? Whichever the federation that government recognizes, we want to adhere to that.
Okay. Abhishek, after Abhishek, we'll take some questions from the audience. After you.
Sure. No, I think I agree with what Anurag you're also highlighting. Of course, Sean's point of view is 100% acceptable. I think your suggestion is good in the sense that, I think there could be at this initial stage where the difference between high-performing players and maybe those, who are not even seen or recognized is very vast. Maybe it calls for a double-tier sort of a engagement where some of the top athletes may be put together in a common sort of a competing platform where the outcomes can then be paired with maybe some of the other uprising stars and essentially paired basis performance. That's the beauty of electronic sports. One last piece, we are engaging, as I said, on the policy. I'd like to limit myself to policy. It's important. As I said, esports is a state subject now. It will be moving forward. We are already working closely with a couple of state governments, and may I add, just come back from Uttar Pradesh as well. State government is, we have a detailed conversation with the state government. We are working on the esports policy for the state. And I feel that's where your collective representation is missing right now. And therefore, we've also suggested to them that we'd like the largest number of not just the industry, but also the players. So as FEAI, we will be inviting and inducting the existing database we have from Uttar Pradesh, which represents our player database, because that's the only way that we can empower regional engagement. If a policy gentleman at the state does not know what's really happening, to be very honest, the difference between esports and gaming for them is invisible. We need to first go there and sort of start empowering them and then work towards building out the right talent pool.
Just one thing I like to add, Nimish, I forgot to mention. So the way I measure our success, winner of our amateur league for Valorant is now Revenant team. The winner of our Pokemon Unite Major League tournament is today Enigma team, and second is Remnant team. So we are also working as a scouting ground for teams like Seven Seas. So that's one thing we need to work on as a PO.
So I guess it looks like we're all in good hands. I will open up the floor to any questions if people have. We got a question from Deborah. Is there a mic?
Okay, hello. So, hi Nimish, hi everyone. So, this is a very interesting topic actually. So, I understand that just last December, India government has finally recognized esports as part of the multi-sports event. So, we all understand and we know that the government now realized that esports can be one of many ways to put India in a global map and to make India recognized in the esports industry as well and gaming industry. But esports has a very unique system compared to the physical sports. And the game that usually being chosen for Asian Games or maybe for Olympics is the most popular game in the world. And every host country has the right to choose whatever games they want to be played, right? So as a country, India needs to adjust to that, right? But I see that there are some of the most popular games, especially when we talk about mobile games, is not available in India. So how do you guys face this?
I think that's a very interesting chat. I'll probably ask Sohn to answer that, and then maybe Abhishek.
Actually, I didn't really got the question.
So, what she was asking was. So, what Deborah's asking in short is, every host country gets a chance to select the games for the Asian Games. That's the structure right now. And unfortunately, any game that people select which is popular, somehow or the other is disappeared from India. So how does India prepare for something like that, where if 5 out of the 10 games at the Asian Games, we are not really playing them, so how are we going to compete in them?
Yes, Sean, I also want to know the answer.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what.
Yes. And basically, in the Asian Games, across the region, India and China are the two places where mobile esports are the most popular. And then we probably have the most dispatch in terms of the games. Whatever's available there is not available here. So, like, how do we kind of rectify that?
Yeah, I mean, that's a very actually good question. Yeah, that's a very good question. But I think there's no right answer to this. I think it will evolve as we have more official events like Asian Games, maybe next Olympics. I think then there will be some alignment. I think it will happen maybe in the next few years. But then again, you don't really need to send the players to all games. I mean, there are some games you may not be able to send players.
I have a fun intended answer to that. If India hosts Asian Games, we'll be the champion in Ludo King, okay? So.
No, so interesting question. I think the important element here is to, it's a very obvious situation. Esports, just like gaming, is all based on data. This is not just a means of entertainment. It's a geopolitical issue at some level. We need to be conscious of that. And law of the land, we have to abide by, what works for the government of the day. We don't want a situation where we are creating an ecosystem on a fantastic platform or a fantastic engagement on a good title, etc. But somehow it leads to a situation where the policymakers have to take a hard stand, right? Which we've seen in the last year and a half or so happen. There have been multiple listings of various organizations, etc. So without getting into those details, my point is very simple. And therefore the regulatory outlook.
Yeah.
So long as the government does not see the confidence to kind of see, okay, what are the loopholes? How do we sort of seep that in? As I'm repeatedly saying, let's call a spade, right? This is not about sports or entertainment. It is a data play. It's a global data play. That's the roulette table that we are all sitting on. And therefore, we need to be very conscious as to what is it that we have to stand and support with. And therefore, I say, As an organization, we call ourselves an athlete-first organization.
Yeah.
It's the outlook that the government prefers. It's the ideal outlook that fits with the mission of Olympics. It's what we call the Olympic movement. That's exactly what we're trying to take to the policymakers at state, whether it's Uttar Pradesh or Gujarat and so on and so forth. It's very simple.
Yeah.
We can complicate it by way of tricky international implications, or just keep it very simple and incubate this idea locally, and then worry about building the right talent. Because without a good foundation, that's not happening. The good part is we have international interest coming in from various investors and title holders and publishers. We just need to sort of come together, right, and align, because the government will be happy to support a steady ship, not one that's wobbly.
Also, just to add to your point, Deborah, the government has not blocked the games from participating. So if you go outside the country, you can compete in those games. It's just that you can't download them here. So we've had instances where we've gone outside and played games that we cannot play here and represented India as well. So that's still possible. Any other questions? Take the mic.
Yeah, hi guys. Hi Nimish. Hi Sohn, guys. So my only one question is that being an esports investor, it's been like 7 months the game is suspended. So Sohn, what do you think that for how much time more we should sustain our players?
I think this question should be taken offline. You don't have to answer, Sohn. It's fine.
I can't.
You're-
Sorry.
No.
Any other questions?
Hi, Nimish. My question is for Abhishek. So, as a regulatory body, right? Obviously, one of the main things is like protecting the player interest, the team interest as well. But I feel as if our government is a long way away from really understanding esports to a point where they can, one, accept it. And as a federation itself, do you feel you have a role to play here in terms of helping bridge that gap of communication to make sure our government also sees what we see esports as the people, as the stakeholders who are part of it? And how can you as a federation help us bridge that gap? Do you have any plans or thoughts for that?
100%. I'd like to, of course, meet you off stage and get to understand where you're from, what's your good name. But in a nutshell, we've actually been doing that very exercise of the past 2 years. Some of the people in this room are privy to that entire engagement, how strongly we've been involved with the government from day one, from our inception. Our primary pitch has always been to be able to sort of, as I said, empower the policy makers. We were the first such esports organization that came up with a policy paper focused on electronic sports to differentiate both by way of law, by way of business, and by way of definition, why this is different from online gaming. Because as I said, so long as they don't, of course they are all erudite personnel within the government, but fact is, as an industry, that's the most enabling role we can play. So we submitted our knowledge paper, we've made formal submissions to both Ministry of Electronics and Ministry of Youth Affairs and Sports. And we are in a better place. As I said, the government has finally recognized there's a differentiation between the two. So that's one big achievement, I think, on that track to growth.
I think we got some really good answers today. And if there's no other questions, I'd like to thank the panel. I think thank you for taking the time and explaining to us how India can try and win a medal at the highest level. And hopefully we see our team competing in all titles very, very soon and not just one or two. And hopefully the game that we love so much will make a comeback very, very soon. And by the end of the year, we'll see another season 2 on Star Sports again. Sorry, I'm just trying to brand myself. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, panelist and Mr. Nimish Raut, for helping us to plan the session so well. Thank you so much.